Devlog01. Hello, my name is Mike, and welcome. I decided if I'm going to be making another game, I might as well do a devlog. Now, what game am I making? I can't tell you that yet. You have to stick around for the whole video. Moving on. Day 1, pretty much set up the whole character movement, added some arrows so I can tell which direction I'm facing. Super helpful since it's a super basic white sphere. Cylinder? Hello? Had to play around with it, mess around, figure out why my arrows are stretching like crazy. But eventually I found the correct way to do it, and as you can see, here we have it working. If I move left, it goes left, right, up, down. I think at this moment I was having an issue where it was doing both arrows at the same time. It didn't account for the player's direction, which is represented by the red arrow. Once I had that done, it was on to level design. And now we weren't making any type of level. We needed a randomly generated map. Now, to me, this was going to be difficult, but actually, it wasn't that hard. So, let me give you the rundown. Essentially, you have 3 blueprints. You have your world gen, your master reference, and your data asset. Your world gen will take care of generating your world. Your master reference is your tile sheets. Essentially, it holds the template of how the tile will be spawned. And then the data asset holds the information, such as the style, what type of items it has, if it has multiple exits or not. So starting off with the master reference, which I will be calling the tile blueprint for now, this holds a collision box. And this collision box, what it does is checks if it's overlapping with another room when it's spawned. Then we have a entrance and the exit volume, which just dictates which is the forward facing of the tile and where other tiles can connect to. Other than that, there are other folders in this blueprint, which is just for structuring it so it's more organized when I want to pull that information out to the world gen. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because Unreal has where you can merge groups of meshes, and it's better to merge a mesh because it reduces your draw calls. The world gen blueprint, essentially, it has a variable that has a reference to the master tile. The world gen essentially spawns the first room, gets its exits, spawns the next room, and depending on how many exits it has, it can choose one of those randomly, and the ones that it doesn't choose, it puts it into an array, which holds a list of all unused exits that the next room that spawns in can use it. Essentially it does that for as many rooms that I need, going left, right, up, down. In the end result, you get a fully functional world generation. Super duper easy. And all that's left now is finding the drive. What theme and scenery will get me going to make this game till the end? So I did what any person would do. Go to the toilet. I sat there and I came up with a crazy idea. Bones. Hear me out. I was gonna call it dungeon callers. You get it? Because you're the phone and then you get called into the dungeon. So it's dungeon callers. It was so cool. The idea was crazy. It was amazing. It was gonna be mechs. Need I say more? Now, at this point, we're at day 3. Day 2 I usually just focused on making the weapon, how to shoot mechanic and all that. Day 3 was just dedicated to learning how to animate. Yeah, it took me the whole day. In the end, I managed to get this semi-cool spawn animation where the mech like it's time falling. That's pretty much the end of day 3. Short, right? But who cares? Day 4 is gonna be amazing. I deleted everything. Yep, we're starting over. There's a reason why I didn't say what game I was making in the start. What you think? I was gonna make a roguelike? All that work was actually for this other game, a turn-based strategy game. Intrigued yet? Wait, there's more. It's a Game Boy Color game. This game is Game Boy Wars 3. I know. Exciting. Not many people know about this game. It was a Japan exclusive game. The map was laid out in a grid. it wasn't your typical grid where you had up, down, left, right, and it was like aligned. It was a actual hexagonal grid. It might not look like a hexagonal grid, but if you can notice, the map is shifted slightly for some of the rows, which presents 6 sides to it. Pretty creative way of making a hexagon, I would say so. But essentially, this allows you to pull off a lot of control around the map. You can box in your enemy, you can box them out. I really fell in love with this game, and I'm super passionate about trying to make it out. See if I can even create it. Let's start off from where we left off. We are on day 4, and while I was yapping away, I had it playing in the background. So, we're now moving to day 5. Just kidding. So day 4, essentially, I set up the basics again. Character movement, all that stuff. This time with the mouse, trying to figure out how am I going to set up this grid base. Am I going to have it interactable with the mouse, or am I going to have it interactable with the actual controller? In the end, I ended up going with player controller, and I had to restrict it to a grid movement. So it would go a certain distance when you hit forward, and if you hold it, it would have like a little delay, but it would still move forward. But now I needed to do the world generation. Since it's a hex grid, the old generation that I made is not going to cut it. I'm going to need new calculations, figure out the width, the height, and determine spaces it needs to start building out. Took me a while, but I ended up figuring it out. It's not something crazy, super basic. It just grabs from a list of static meshes, colors, and randomly populates them. I do want to have the grid dictate like what type of buildings will spawn here, but that'll be for the next day. Starting day 5, didn't do much. Actually, it wasn't home at all, so we're gonna be skipping to day 6. Day 6 was pretty much dedicated to fixing bugs, setting up the assets for the hexes, and setting up the structure data for the game. I needed all the type of information that this game would hold, properties, the hex types, would pretty much be like the biomes: mountain, river, right, forest, grass, or plains it would be called. Also the units. Now we're near to the end of day 6, and I ended up spending the rest of the day tweaking and polishing the board a little bit more, making the grid more snappier, more responsive, making sure there's nothing with selecting. You can tell what you're hovering over and what you have selected. Pretty much setting it up for the future. Okay, now let's talk about the art style. As right now, you see everything's all like shiny and like plasticky look. Isn't that really the style I'm going for? I am going to do a pixel art game. The 3D objects will be with pixel textures. I guess the best game that would describe the style of it would be Minecraft. Minecraft, right, has 3D objects and they have pixel textures on all their 3D objects, but then they also have pixel art item. So essentially, I would like to have a sprite for the infantry vehicles, and they would be 3D sprites in the maps, and the platforms that would hold the cities, the different types of biomes, right, factories, HQ, they would be 3D, but with the pixel art texture. So the game essentially would fall under the category of 2.5D. And with that said, that's the end of day 6. Moving on to day 7, the last day of the week. Starting off day 7, I haven't done much coding, actually, for this. No modeling. Mostly, this day was focused on creating the UI and understanding how I want the UI to flow. I did want to keep it minimalistic. It's in the corner, and it gives you all the information you need without filling up your whole entire screen, so you can focus more on figuring out what strategies you want to use to push certain angles, just keeping it clean and simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. It's already a pretty basic UI to begin with. We're just giving it a little bit more color. I definitely designed it with controller in mind. I definitely want the controller to be the main focus. You don't really need to touch the mouse at all. You can play this game fully on keyboard too without the mouse. So starting off with the base menu, when you're already in a match, you have 2 options. Go back to the hex grid where the battle is taking place, or you can end your turn. Besides those 2 buttons is the quit button if you just want to quit the match. This will probably change depending on how many different menus I want to have for a main menu, but right now it's just simple, so I can easily load into a game, see what's buggy, what's not. Next would be is when you hover over a property. So let's say you're hovering over the city property here. You select it. It tells you whether the property is captured or not. It tells you how much gold you're producing per day, and it also gives you the strength bar on the top. Other than that, you have a deploy button on the bottom if you want to build more troops, and the troops that are allowed in the city to be built. So like your infantry, your mechs. And then right next to it, you have the little upgrade button. That is to reinforce your base. So the button would appear there when you have the option to do it. So these buttons will be grayed out if you don't have the option to do it. But if you do, they'll appear and they'll be in those spots. Let's say you want to deploy a troop. You will then move down to this next screen. And here, it'll give you like a slide. So you can hit the right arrow, left arrow, and you'll cycle through the available troop you can build. Each giving you the gold cost it requires, the material cost it requires, and some basic information that you need to know, like movement power that it has, and how much rations if a soldier, or how much fuel it has as a vehicle. I think later on I'll probably add to this so it can show you their weapon stats to how much ammo they have and they can carry. Other than that, let's say you select this soldier, want to deploy it. Pay the gold material, you go into this other screen, and all these buttons again will appear when you have the option to use these buttons. You won't see all of them always at once. They'll be grayed out if you can't use them, and if you can, they'll show. Describing the buttons pretty much is remove the soldier from the battlefield, move your unit, attack with your unit, resupply your unit, and the last one is join. People who played it will remember join is pretty much you can transfer health from one unit to the other. That's all. Wow. 7 days. All bunched down into 11 minutes. I think this was a great week. I did lose pretty much 3 days of work, but ultimately it allowed me to create the games I want to make. As of right now, this is the state of my game. I hope you enjoyed.